Hello, I'm Hannah Jewell, and this is Building for Peace with Hannah Jewell, a podcast focusing on sovereignty in food and healthcare based in Sussex. Today we have with us Kristina, a dear friend of mine who hails from Cyprus, grew up in London, and has a passion for food. Kristina, how did you get into food? Like, what's the moment that it became important to you, and what's the journey of it becoming a central focus?
Well, coming from a Greek Cypriot background, food has always been the focus, the family focus, getting together and celebrating. There was always food, you know. Are you hungry as soon as you come in through the door? And so that kind of sharing and that moment together has always been important for me. And back in 2014 I was working at Redmond Community Centre in Hackney, East London, and I was working on this project called Well London, which was about working across the borough of Hackney and looking at how we could bring different elements like well-being, movement, food, growing in this term of kind of Well London. And yeah, we had this idea to start a food waste kitchen because there was lots of different things and people happening around, and back then, yeah, there wasn't as many projects like that, and you would really see the food waste, observe the food waste coming out of grocers, of supermarkets, people skip diving and all of this stuff, and there wasn't as much framework. And we connected with the local wholesalers there, amazing, Fresh and Fruity they're called, and they were in the heart of sort of northwest Hackney, and they served all different kinds of community. And when we approached them, they were just like, come round the back kind of thing. And we'd go around the back and there'd be cages of fruit and veg, perfectly fine, you know, slightly bruised, slightly wonky, some on the edges, but we would go with our bike trailer and cycle back to the community centre, and we would lay it all out on the kitchen tables and invite community, local people to come, and we would talk about the food, talk about food waste, and come from a plant-based perspective. You know, what would you create with this? How would you make this without, say, butter, or what could we use instead of this? And so we would kind of play and experiment. And by the end of the session, you would just have a spread of food that you wouldn't even imagine you could put on a menu. And just so eclectic and so cultural. And as that went on and we got to learn about more of the people's needs across the estate, because the community centre is on a big estate, and people would come from all backgrounds, you know, and suffering from kind of very common diseases like obesity, diabetes, kind of high blood pressure, suffering with aches and pains, and how could we, simple things, include more water in our diet, or what could we eat with our food, you know, making broths, making soups, making stews, getting more sort of nourishment in there. And we kind of developed this lovely well-being program, and it went on for about 4 years.
Wow.
In the community centre there, and by the end the kids that had been in the capoeira class next door on that night, they would slowly start to come in at the end of their session and start serving, help serve. They would try, every week they would try something else, different, and then we eventually managed to get them in the kitchen a bit more and helping out, and it was really beautiful. It was a real like hub of the week for us and for the local residents. And oh, there's so much that you could do there. You know, there was the garden, you could forage, and you were only limited by your time, really. Because there's only so much time and things you can do on one project in one evening. And then it just spiraled from that. I never thought I was going to cook or run a cooking business. It just organically just flowed. There was I can't remember what they're called now, but there was a local group working with special needs people, and they wanted to put on an equinox event, they said, oh, could you do some cooking with us and for us? And that was our first event as such. And then a friend of ours, oh, can you cover me at this event? Okay, we'll try. And then it just kind of spiraled and rolled on and took us out of London, really, and out of the food waste side and more into looking at local growers and local producers and organic food, even though it made the cost of things go up. But we knew that the nourishment we were putting inside was worth it. And yeah, so that was about 7 seasons we've done now, 7 festival seasons, and each year has had its own flavour because we've had different crew coming in and out. So before COVID, so for a good 5 years from when we were running, we had the same core crew every year, really eclectic team, and a lot of them joined us because they came as volunteers. So they would turn up, or we would communicate, they'd come as volunteers, and if there was this resonance and this kind of passion and excitement for co-creating, they naturally would come and step in a paid role. And so for 5 years we had a really strong team of co-creators, and yeah, it was great. And then COVID came, and obviously we couldn't trade for a while. And a lot of the core crew, they're from different lands, different countries, have sort of migrated back to kind of figure out what's going on. And yeah, we started again a couple of years ago, but there's a change. There's a change now in the festival environment and in the food systems and the cost of produce, and there's a quality that there's definitely asking to become more business and very kind of negotiating, and it's stepped away from this kind of flow and co-creation. It's like we have to value our time, we have to value each other, and it's a very stressful environment. So if you don't have these kind of core agreements or core things in place, anything can happen. And food is such an emotional need as well as kind of an actual physical need of nourishment. You know, a lot of us eat out of emotion as well. And when you're on a festival or a retreat or any kind of event, you're feeding the people as they're going through a process. So it can be very intense. So for example, on a Sunday of a festival, you know, and I say this to our team, Sunday will be the most tricky day in terms of customers asking, can I have a bit more? Can I add this? Could you do this? Because it's like you're a little bit more tired, a little bit more out of your comfort zone. You might not have had a shower. You might have been in a deep workshop. You know, there's a lot of processes that happen in a retreat, festival, anything. So it's like we have to expand ourselves to fit and meet. And it's not easy.
It's not easy. Consciously or unconsciously, they really need the oat milk in their tea on Sunday.
Yes. Yeah, a little bit of extra sweetness on a Sunday.
This connection between the emotions and food is vital, and when we're connected to where the food comes from, that changes the way we emotionally relate to it. In my experience, I can eat fewer of the tomatoes from my own garden. I feel wonderful. There's something about that connection with them from the seed that makes a big difference. Let's talk about food a little bit and where it comes from. So you started with food waste, which is a massive transformational journey. You know, it's been discarded, and you're bringing life back into it, resuscitating that. So that energy must have gone into the project. And then when you're buying wholesale food, it's coming from a whole range. We had not just COVID, but we had Brexit here. And this has changed where we're getting our food from. Some things are harder to get. For example, some shops don't carry tahini since Brexit. I have to go to different places to get it. It doesn't. Sesame seeds don't grow here.
So good.
You can never have too much tahini. So what's your experience with where the food is coming from?
Yeah, it's just as you were saying, I remembered a time we went to pick up food waste in London, and there was this warehouse. I can't remember the project now, but we kind of connected with the project, and they had crates and crates of this gorgeous organic tomato pasta sauce, and they couldn't sell it. They weren't allowed to sell it because on the packaging it had said the sweetest tomatoes, or something like that, naturally sweet. And when it had gone through a test, it hadn't hit a certain mark of sweetness, and so they couldn't brand it and sell it. So that's just like crazy, you know. So all of that like effort and work in some ways, which is a shame for the producers and the growers, but great for projects like us at the time. And I couldn't believe it, like the way the regulations are, and the way that you have to tick a certain box, and then it's labelled as not good enough or a waste, even though it is not, it's transformed. But just the way that the kind of regulations think, there isn't space for common sense. Sometimes it's just this very you know, and I find that challenging. So that's why working with local producers and local growers, where you can have more conversation and more barter or kind of exchange. So this year we worked with a lovely guy called Alex, and he has a plot of land in this kind of community space, and he also makes loads of ferments and pickles from his own vegetables. And so we would, you know, just say to him, Alex, can we have this? And he'd come with buckets and buckets of different ways, and it kind of, us supporting him gave him creative juice in a way. He'd never sold like that before, in that way, that amount, in such a kind of situation. And I was just watching him, and he was, oh, can I add this? Can I do this? And it was like, yeah, like bring it, you know. And so it really was wonderful to watch him, but also to eat and then to serve. You know, the colours of the pickled purple cauliflower, or the beetroots and the pink radishes, and you know the white and pink beetroots, and all the different flavours, and to know that it had been made with such kind of joy. You know, you could really taste that. And then on the flip side, you know, if you have to, what was the event that we did this year? And we want to, you know, so some people have budget needs, obviously, and we can't always reach that top end quality of food. But you miss it. You miss the taste, and you can really feel it, especially carrot, like all the, you know, carrots, tomatoes, cucumbers, these kind of, you know, very tasty stuff from this land, from this earth. And I kind of got to the point, if I can't afford to buy in organic or afford to support local businesses, then why am I doing this? Why am I creating a business that's not based on that kind of permaculture, earth care, fair share, people care, you know, this kind of wholesome way? Then I'm just like every other trader. I'm just trying to make money, and then I sort of lose the joy for it, and it becomes like a churning of food, and that essence for me this year has sort of dwindled, and I would love to continue, but stay small. You know, there's been some traders, they're like, why are you closed during the day? You know, why aren't you just keep making and selling? And it's like, we're tired. We want to rest. We want to go and enjoy some music or a workshop. Yeah, but what? And it's this we just don't want to work like that. We want to have our own self-care, because you can't be feeding people, and the food essentially at a festival or an event helps really ground people so that they can go off and experience something. And if I'm cooking the food and it's like, then that's what they will also feel inside. So this year I really clocked the value of closing during the day and giving all workers a break. And we all really valued that, and having our check-ins, daily check-ins, where we're at sometimes twice a day if something had happened or there was some kind of conflict. But it's kind of the food side, but also the people side. And if they don't meet, then you can't give your best, kind of thing. And if you can't give your best, then I question why we're still doing it that way. Yeah.
This has been so apparent to me over the last weeks, just in looking at life and in thinking about many of the situations we're all transitioning through and into, as remaining small in our business ventures as a conscious choice, and choosing not to expand the way our capitalist mindset has sort of conditioned us to do, but to value the quality and ourselves. I'm really happy to hear that you've been able to do that this summer. Several questions on that. Were you able to float the business financially while caring for your team and yourself and keeping small? And were there some benefits or challenges out of that decision that weren't expected?
Yeah, it was funny at this one festival, and we'd chosen to be us, to show up as us. We've got our small, low sign, low lights, and both traders next to us was like big signs, big lights, 3 or 4 things, churning it out 24/7. And when we got there first, I was like, oh my God, is anyone going to come to us? Is anyone going to see us? There's a certain fear or panic that comes in, because you come with loads of produce and ideas and baked goods and this that you want to offer. And then a part of me was like, don't worry, just trust. As soon as they taste what you're offering, they will come back. And it's like, okay. And I could feel people, my colleagues around me, we should make a big sign, right, okay, saying sold now and this, and I was just like, don't worry, it's okay. Inside I was like, but I was just trusting. I was like, don't worry, By the end, we'd sold out. By the end of the festival, we'd sold out. And yeah, so it's kind of, you have to manage your own fears, but when it's your team, and you kind of have to pay people, because it's such a risk. This industry is such a risk. You don't know, really. So it's this kind of game that you're playing. And you have to take responsibility for that. So there has been some events earlier in the year with a new team that we didn't quite hit the mark a few times. And so a couple of us who have been holding more space, we took the cup, kind of thing. We said, it's okay. It's a learning. We're learning. We knew we were experimenting, so we'll take the back of that. We make sure the other workers are paid. And that felt fair. And then there's been other events where we've been able to cover ourselves and more and give back. And so yeah, this summer was definitely edgy, experimenting. But in the end it proved well. And we finished the event with Heart of the Rose, a women's gathering. Yeah. And it was a really small, intimate gathering on the land, and it was a really nice way to honour everything we've been through, this Heart of the Rose, the kind of more gentle approach. And I always want to do events like that. I don't think I could grow bigger or go to people, oh, you're going to Glastonbury? It's like, no way. But I don't think my nervous system could handle that. I have a toddler as well. And I think it's amazing when children come. So a few of us had our children at all about love. And it was amazing to have them there so they could see us in context, because they see us at home baking or planning things or packing things, and then they come to this co-creative space, they're like, wow, and they can run off or go on their bikes, and they can come back to nourishment and safety and go and come back. So that was really beautiful to witness. And then there are other events where they just can't come, it's just you have to focus, and they have to be with family or friends. But the way festivals are going, it's becoming very commercial, and we have experience of rainbows and cooking in Calais and this at the community centre, so we have these kind of background ethical community like work and base, and I feel sometimes at a festival it's uncomfortable for me to even raise prices to sell, because that's what everybody's doing and the prices have gone up, and I'm just like, who am I serving? Who am I affecting here?
And I wonder what festivals are going, which way they're going to go. I felt it myself, this seeping in of an profit agenda into the spiritual community. So festivals and events, beyond festivals, just events that have a spiritual focus but have more of a trading focus. And I know that it's not just happening here. I think Charles Eisenstein did a talk recently on desacralizing the sacred through these paid events, and how we've really got to attend to this as a community of people, a global community of people who are moving more and more towards meditation and yoga, and then on the deeper end getting trained. So many people are training in trauma therapy, shamanism, etc. And what do they do when they come out of that? Is it just about making profit? Like, where these questions, where is the self-care, where is the community, where is the nourishment? They're absolutely vital that we not just think about them, but make decisions that really ground us in where these practices came from, why they feed us. So I don't know where the festival and event scene is going to go.
Yeah.
And
it's like people are really selling themselves, everything that pops up on social media, and it's like, it's amazing to train in deep work, the practices you mentioned, but then when you come out of it, and then you have to sell yourself, because we live in this crazy, rental system, everything's going up the bills, and so you have to be able to survive and thrive. Doing what you love is even, the most important. So I get it, but then it comes with this. But when you have to really push and be on this social media and sell yourselves, it's like that some kind of thread just gets broken. Like,
exactly. Carolyn Mace is a spiritual author and speaker who came more to the forefront in the 1990s, and she did this work on the 12 houses of the zodiac with 12 archetypes, and one of those being where you work in this world with money and earn a living and deal with exchange, because even before money we had exchange and barter, right? So what archetype do we want to bring into that house? And one of the possibilities is the prostitute, which doesn't mean selling your body, but I think about this all the time. How far am I willing to sell myself in that house? And what archetype might I rather have in there? And all of us are having to engage this.
I had feedback from a dear colleague, a herbal friend, and we've done some lovely creations this summer, and I've really valued her presence there. And I was doing a long drive the other day, and I had a chat with her, and she was like, thank you, Kristina, for this summer, for really creating space to allow others to shine. You give so much space that somebody can bring a creation in and be empowered. And I was like, thank you, but also that's, you know, talking of archetypes, and that's also a shadow of mine, where I step back so much and hold space and create so much that others will come in and take, from good intentions, from bad intentions, from unconscious intentions, you know. And it's my habit to hide. I hide behind them. So then I don't shine, and it's the others that will take what they need. And so by the end, they're constantly doing, everyone takes what they need, and then I'm there just like at the back, slowly, like energy depleting. So there's that fine balance between, you know, creating so much space and listening to the needs of others and giving it. It's like mothering, isn't it? It's like, you know, you're adapting so much, but at some point there has to be some kind of sovereign boundary that's just like, actually, this is not okay, or this is where I claim my space. And I think that's a practice, if you're that end rather than the selling yourself end. That's a practice in becoming authentic and just cutting down. I feel like that's what I'm doing now, is cutting down and getting clearer on what I'm really good at and what ignites my fire, and just offer that one thing, two things, not this, you know. I've trained myself, and as women I think we do, to be so multitasking, so adaptable, so moulding, and being able to do all these things, but actually you're kind of defocusing on a few just like crucial elements that you will then shine in. So it's like, how can that fit in as well, to kind of,
this is the balance of the feminine and the masculine within us, which we all need. Yeah, and in my own journey too, I hit a point many years ago and I said, I'm not going to be everyone's mother anymore. And some people don't like this, but that's all right. Because bringing that masculine with boundaries into play actually gives your own feminine space to be with a little more ease. We're naturally going to multitask and see a lot of possibilities. I was talking to my Sufi teacher last night, and we were talking about the feminine and the masculine like this a little bit, and my deep feeling in the world. The potency of our own vibration is, in the end, what brings that balance into harmony. It's one thing to have an idea, but for the balance to harmonize within the self, within the being, it's the potency of the own inner vibration that you carry. And this,
can you say it again?
Yeah.
Can you say it like,
it's what you were saying about letting go of some things and knowing what ignites your fire. That fire is going to burn your inner heart vibration until it's flickering. And from there, you just give that. Just give from the depths of your potency. Of course, there's a whole forest of who you are, but in terms of your interaction with the world, let the depth of that vibration just shine. And this is really effective in terms of your own self-care as that big forest, but you can be that feminine, but that masculine has its light going out there. And that light can be visible without having to be a big sign and a big floodlight saying, "We're now."
Yeah. And it's knowing which parts you can do by yourself, because you need to, because we're so used to being, you know, in the old systematic ways, and this kind of, it's like knowing what can we do by ourselves and for ourselves, and what can we do in community and in cooperation.
Yeah.
I always wanted Redmond Roots to be a CIC, a community interest company. And we went down the line a few years ago, and we looking at the application forms, putting our business proposal together, and there was, over the years, there was 3 cafes that were offered to us, and we all almost kind of each time stepped into that role, holding space. but I'm in a CIC capacity. But I think why it didn't come together is that people are also afraid of stepping into a system, because to be in a cooperative or a CIC, there's a lot of paperwork, first of all, and a lot of agreements and a lot of signing and a lot of terminology you might not understand. But then there's commitment, and there's showing up, and there's responsibility. And I think it's that kind of, when it comes to cooking and dedicating yourselves to it that way, I really admire. There's a few companies like Made in Hackney, People's Kitchen, Made Up Collective with a dear friend Kieran, that have kind of stuck to their principles, and they keep working in the community realm, and they keep finding a way to get new funding or new projects and do this and change, make spaces, change this. And it's amazing to witness people that are committed to that. But in terms of us in our growth, where we kind of branched into the festivals, which was more transient, to kind of create a CIC in a festival didn't really have that roots, Red Moon roots. I think the roots comes back before that. I kind of vision the space. I mean, it's just kind of coming now, but where we can cook more on the fire, we can forage, we can be by the water. There's more elemental kitchen, an outdoor kitchen, and then we can go somewhere, but that's the hub. Like there's already a strong foundation, and then you can go to an event, but you're already smelling of the smoke. You're already kind of warmed by your interaction and knowing who you are. It is in the dynamic. We've had a few fallouts over the years with colleagues, and a lot of talk about non-violent communication and kind of being able to show up. And it's really hard when it happens at a festival, and it can be flash, and it's really hard to pull yourself back from just being a reactive child and kind of being more like encompassing. But it's taught me so much about what to own up what is mine, and to also reflect back what isn't, and to be quite there's a few things that kind of stir my mama bear energy, because generally I'm quite adaptable, but there's a few things that kind of really stir my mama bear, and this kind of, then the fire comes out, and that comes a lot when people bring their stuff, like we all do, but they don't own it, and they kind of reflect it onto you. And it's and you're just kind of like there, and you're just like, but surely that's you. How can we find that we're both in this, we've both called this in, we're both in this dynamic. And I think that's been difficult for people over the years, to join a stressful, creative, unknown, mystical kitchen, to be faced with your stuff within cooking. All the workshops can happen outside, but all the workshops are happening inside as well. And it's a really potent way to work that I think I need a sabbatical to integrate. After 7 years, and now my son will be 4, and I need to turn that creative energy back into us and our home and our rhythm, and cooking again with the seasons, and this like having excitement of first things with him, while we still can, while we're still at this young age. And he loves food, he loves cooking and chopping and licking spoons, of course, cakes, and but looking after him makes me make different choices, obviously, from what I might eat, what I might think is ethical. He definitely needs growing. He needs to grow. So that nourishment is very different from a kind of plant-based ideal, like in the home. Since becoming pregnant and having Ocean, it's about the bone broths, and it's about this kind of slower food. It doesn't always happen, of course, modern life, but I think we're at this junction now where we're taking a turn and stepping away from sort of normal life as such, and we're moving to a community in Dartmoor. And there's an opportunity now to really get into our bones of nourishment. It feels like we're entering a different phase. So I don't know what the cooking is going to be like, but I see on Instagram these people making amazing herbal floral cakes, and they're just like mad beautiful creations, and I get really excited about that. And so I want to really play with what we have on this land, and kind of go out together and then make something, and for it not to be perfect or not to be for sale or not to kind of meet an expectation, but to be something in the moment that's like nourishing, creative and delicious, like and just kind of just get really creative with it.
I love how you bring that creativity into it. That's something I often fall short of because it takes time. But what joy. You know, you're so creative, Kristina. I saw once that you took a giant pumpkin, cut it in half, and baked a lasagna inside of it. I was like, who would have ever thought to do that? But it looks amazing.
Yeah, it was like a no-mato sauce, just trying out like without tomatoes or nightshades to see how much other vegetables I can get into ocean. So it was beetroot and carrot, tomato no-mato sauce, and then this layered. It was Halloween, and so it's just like playing with these kind of marks, these points, but in a very fun way, creative way, and children help you do that, right? Get back into your wacky, let's do this.
Kristina, you've already talked about relationships and community, but I wondered if you wanted to touch one more time on the importance of that. You have such an inherent understanding of community within you, and it's been refined by these projects. And you've mentioned it a few times, but as all of us are moving more into community-focused mindsets, you know, what are some of the fruits you might share in terms of how to work in community, what community actually is? What does it actually mean to be in community as a business person, as a sovereign individual?
My grandpa said some wise words to me many years ago, and he said, talking about his wife, my grandma, he was like, never go to sleep on an argument. You could always make a cup of tea and have a chat. And it was that very simple, very kind act, and that kind of generational, like, you know, I can feel my grandparents with me a lot, and that kind of having a tea, having a moment, and not, you know, because we get so far into projections if something happens, or reactions, or any kind of emotion gets triggered when something happens in dynamics. And it's like that simple act of just making a tea, or like the other day, I offered soup to my housemate after we'd had some kind of moment, and I was like, would you like some soup? And it just straight away like, breaks the ice and breaks the stories running around the head, for myself as well, because it takes me a moment to check in with myself. If I've gone into reactive play, go on, offer tea, go on, offer some, go on, you know, I have to push myself as well. But then as soon as I do, it's like, okay, then there's space, there's a bit of space that opens. And I found that when somebody can't meet me in that place, when they have to go or they can't talk, it doesn't have to be immediately, but soon, then I sort of lose thread. I sort of lose thread and connection with that person, because what I'm really asking is for us to show up. So I think in community or in any kind of project, it's like showing up, and if it's not then, okay, when can we? Because otherwise other things happen, and time takes in, and then there's a point in me that just feels like it's not met, and then I don't know how to meet them anymore until we've had that cup of tea. I remember reading a book years ago. It was called 3 Cups of Tea, and it was about this explorer. I think he was in Pakistan and on the borders there and Afghanistan, and he went to build schools for girls in the end. And what their culture, what they do there is have 3 cups of tea, and 3 cups of tea could take all night. It could take 2 days. You might, or they could take an instant, but the agreement normally between the men would only come after you've had 3 cups of tea. And there's a kind of like process and almost ritual coming back to the food as kind of ritual and sacredness. It's like, I think it's really important to share a moment with some kind of vessel that breaks that ice. So I just reminded of that book, but I definitely think having your space is very good. Having lived in communities, warehouse communities, shared houses, living in Steiner communities, looking after special needs women, and all these different kinds of ways of living, I think it's very important to have your space so that you're not reactive to somebody's mess or somebody's this or somebody, so you have a kind of clear mind, but there's some kind of communal space that you can meet in or share once a week, twice a week, however it's work set up, so that you have your time and space to find who you are, be authentic, and then you can bring it. Whereas if you're kind of forced into it every day, it's such a habit. Good morning, how are you? I just say, hi, how are you? And really you don't want to answer that. I don't even want to say it, but it comes out. Really, I'd want to just be like, just real. So I think having your space is really important, and then you can come out into the world and be present. But how that works in kind of modern reality, I don't know. It's really hard.
As you were speaking, I found myself just really wishing that we had time for this 3 cups of tea in our interactions. So often we have a meeting, sometimes it's even just an online meeting, and then you're making contracts. And where is that? I love this idea of the 3 cups of tea, and I wonder how I might start to imbue a little bit of that into my own rhythm and sensibility. And we can tell so much about each other when we have space and we come together. It's like, how are they showing up in the group? And this can be such an indication of where they're at in their own little space, which is not just their physical space, but their heart. That coming and going seems really important.
On the land, being able to get out and go for walks and be on the land and just have the wind kind of blow through the mind, and just to really take the time to feel the sun or walk barefoot, even if it's 2 minutes. I mean, it's a reminder to myself as well, but it just dispels a lot of the talk inside.
To let ourselves be supported as communities by nature, which is also equally radical, because communities do tend to be focused on a place, a building, a place where you gather. I'm thinking about that.
I think music is really important too. Even if you play an instrument, don't play an instrument, but just you play, like we used to live in a warehouse community, and some people were amazing musicians, some people couldn't play at all, but there would be regular jamming nights, and you were invited to pick up something, anything, and people teach you or show you, or you just play one note over and over, and people play around, and there's some kind of unspoken communication when music comes in, and I really love that, and I want more of that kind of dialogue with sound and with playfulness. And so I feel that there was a few years ago we had our cafe space, and we would have a second stage as well, and a lot of the people in our crew are musicians or storytellers, poets or clowns, or but they had an opportunity to go up and share. So you'd see somebody chopping or serving, and then when it was their time, this kind of transformation comes out, and this shininess and this other joy, and then when they come back into the kitchen space, it's like, okay, back to it. But there's you've seen their inner child in a way. And I was singing this year just a little gig at Into the Wild, and the build up to it, the mind was like, oh, how's it going to be? And then actually doing it, and I just felt my inner child just like, why would I hide this? This is silly. We've been singing and sharing stories around the fire for so long. Why do we suddenly become, the ego, or must get it right, or must do this? And of course, the practice makes perfect, and to be an artist is really hard work as well. But yeah, there's something different in the way. In other cultures, like there's this drum and dance camp we go to in Wales, and I remember a few years ago, one musician there was just like, even if you just shake the maraca once, or you clap your hands, or you sing, you sing one tone, you are the musician too. Like, you are part of it. We can't create it without you, and you are part of our experience as the musicians. It's like you are the musicians. Yeah, so it's like this more whole way of being, and I think I wonder how we can relearn and untrain our minds in this part of the world to kind of encompass more of that in creativity and business. That I'm not buying from you and you're not doing me a favour, or I'm not doing, it's like, but we are doing this together, and what I have is of value as much as what you have, and there's this exchange, and that's sacred, and that I value. I honour you and I see you, and you honour me and see me, and there's no like wanting more or needing more. It's like, how can we embody more of this conscious business? I don't know. A friend gave me a book a few years ago, which I find challenging to read because it has a lot of truths in there, and I'm not in that headspace after becoming mama. But it's about this cafe in America called Cafe Gratitude, and the book is sacred. It's sacred, not commerce like Charles Eisenstein, but it's I think it is, maybe it is. I have to check. But it talks about their cafe and how like the meals there, it's called like when you go to order, you say like, I am abundant and I am, it sounds cheesy, but when you go to, it's like you're stating this and you're like, this is what I want, this is what I want to eat. And like their values that they have around hours and meetings and work, as I'm reading this book more and more on and off, it just has this kind of cafe gratitude, like it has this resonance of sacred business, of sacred commerce, and like that's the realm I want to go into. And yeah, I think that's why I need to stop acting as I was until there's more framework and more resonance of that around, which I feel is coming.
Yeah. Oh, it's so exciting, Kristina. Yeah. Really, you're such an inspiration to me. And there's so much I will take from this conversation, really, and bring into my own life. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for offering. I wasn't expecting or prepared at all. Nice just to see you and have a chat.
So if people would like to get in touch with you, how might they do that?
So Red Moon Roots, you can look us up, and we're on and off social media, spending time together. But I want to share from that authentic place, and so I find that making posts difficult because I'm not there. So let's see what the winter brings.
Well, thank you, Kristina and Red Moon Roots. And if you would be interested in sharing your story on this podcast, then please do be in touch. It's been a joy having you listening today.